The Catskill Gymnasium held 412 people on the night of March 14, 1981. It was a Friday. The overhead lights had been running since 6 in the evening, and by 9:30 the air inside the building carried the particular weight of bodies and effort and expectation. The floor was worn pine, pale and dense, and the ring in the center of the room stood under the brightest point of the light, as though it had been placed there by someone who understood theater. Outside on the 2-lane road that ran past the gymnasium, a truck moved through the dark at 30 miles an hour. Its headlights crossed the parking lot and kept moving. It did not slow. Inside, nobody was looking at the door. The man who had walked through it 40 minutes earlier had taken a seat in the 4th row, left side end of the bench. He was wearing a plain gray canvas jacket over a white t-shirt. His boots were work boots, not training shoes. He had a paper cup of coffee that he had stopped drinking. He was watching the ring. His name was not announced when he entered. No one at the door recognized him. A woman at the registration table had asked him twice for his last name before writing it down wrong. In the next 4 seconds, in front of 411 people who had come to watch someone else, everything in that room would change direction. Nobody seated on those bleachers knew that yet. The man in the gray jacket knew. He was the only one. There is a thing that happens in rooms where real fighters gather. It is not visible. It does not make a sound. But when someone steps through the door, who has stood at a level of the craft that most people in the room will never reach, the room registers it the way water registers the approach of weather. Not with alarm, with a kind of pressure. The man in the 4th row had been registered by no one. He preferred it that way. His name was Chuck Norris. He was 41 years old. He stood 5 feet 10 inches and weighed 172 pounds. He had stopped competing professionally in 1974 after winning the professional middleweight karate championship of the world 6 consecutive times. A record that would remain intact for years after the night in question. He had trained since the age of 18. He had spent nearly a decade studying Tang Soo Do under man who made pain pedagogical. He had been training fighters of his own for 7 years by the night he sat in the 4th row of the Catskill Gymnasium with a paper cup he had stopped drinking. He sat with his hands resting on his knees. He did not stretch. He did not bounce. He did not look around the room to see if anyone had noticed him. The main event that evening was a sparring demonstration by a 15-year-old from Brownsville, Brooklyn who had been brought upstate at the request of his trainer, a man named Cus D'Amato. The 15-year-old's name was Mike Tyson. He was 5 feet 11 inches and weighed 214 pounds and had not yet reached his full weight. He had been training under D'Amato for 2 years. In that 2 years, observers from 5 different corners of the professional boxing world had come to the Catskill Gymnasium and left without finishing their coffee. The consensus among them, delivered quietly in the language of men who do not use superlatives carelessly, was that what they had seen was not ordinary. Tyson moved onto the floor at 9:47, and the room adjusted to him the way rooms adjust to sudden weather. He was demonstrating combinations against a training partner, a man 10 years older and 20 pounds heavier, and he was doing it with a kind of contained velocity that made the experienced observers in the room go very still. His footwork was not the footwork of an adolescent. His head movement was not improvised. He had been given a system by D'Amato, a geometry of attack and defense called peekaboo, and he was operating inside it with a precision that should not have been possible at his age. The tournament director that evening, a man named Gerald Wiley who had overseen amateur and semi-professional combat events for 11 years, was seated at a folding table 12 feet from the ring. He had a clipboard. He had stopped writing on it 6 minutes after Tyson began moving. A journalist named Frank Calhoun who covered regional combat sports for a trade publication out of Albany was sitting 2 rows behind the man in the gray jacket. He had a notepad. He had stopped writing on it at the same time Gerald Wiley had stopped writing on his clipboard. This is what they were watching. Tyson threw a jab and a cross and a left hook in a sequence that lasted less than 0.8 of a second. His training partner rolled back from all 3. Tyson closed the distance before the partner had completed the roll and threw a short uppercut that stopped 2 inches from the partner's chin. He did not throw it full. He did not need to. The point was already made, and he knew it. The room watched. The room was quiet in the specific way that rooms go quiet when something is happening that people understand they may not see again. The demonstration lasted 18 minutes. When it ended, the 411 people in the gymnasium did what people in gymnasiums do after they have seen something real. They exhaled slowly and then began to talk. At this point, if you want to find out what happens next, make sure you are subscribed and leave a comment below telling us where you are watching from tonight. The motto crossed from the far side of the ring and said something to Tyson in a low voice. Tyson nodded. He turned and surveyed the room with the particular kind of attention that very young fighters direct at rooms, not seeking approval. Exactly, but cataloging what the room contained. His eyes stopped on the man in the fourth row. What Tyson saw was a man in a gray canvas jacket and work boots sitting at the end of a bench with a paper cup of cold coffee. A man of middle age. A man who, from a distance of 40 feet, did not appear to be anything that needed to be taken note of. This was information Tyson processed in the way that very young people who have been told they are extraordinary process the presence of older men, as context, not as challenge. He did not know who Chuck Norris was. This is a documented fact, confirmed later by people who were present, and by Tyson himself in subsequent years. He was 15 and from Brownsville, and his frame of reference for martial arts had been shaped by what he had seen in the gymnasium and in the streets, and not much else. He said something to the trainer standing to his left, a man named Teddy Atlas. Atlas told him, in 2 words, to leave it alone. Tyson crossed the floor. He stopped at the fourth row. He was standing, and the man in the gray jacket was seated, and the differential in their sizes was visible to everyone who was now watching, which was everyone in the room. Gerald Wiley had put down his clipboard entirely. Frank Calhoun had turned the page in his notepad. What Tyson said, in a voice that carried to the 6th row on either side, was as follows. He said, "You've been watching all night and haven't moved once. Old guys who know something usually get up and try it themselves. Or they go home." It was not, precisely, an insult. It was something younger than an insult. It was the statement of a person who has been told he is exceptional, and has not yet learned that exceptional does not mean singular. It was a door opened by certainty. The man in the gray jacket looked up at him. He held his paper cup in both hands. He said nothing for a moment. Then he set the cup down on the bench beside him and stood up. He was 5 feet 10 inches. He was 2 inches shorter than Tyson and 42 pounds lighter and 26 years older. He removed his canvas jacket with one motion, folded it once along the center seam, and set it across the bench. The recognition wave began in the first row, where 3 men who had trained in Southern California in the late 1960s looked at each other. It spread backward through the bleachers the way a current moves through water, 1 row behind the next, until it reached the 6th row and the journalist Frank Calhoun, who closed his notepad and then opened it again immediately. He had already lost. He just did not know it yet. Chuck Norris stepped onto the floor in his work boots and his white t-shirt and stopped 7 feet from Mike Tyson. 7 feet is a distance with a specific meaning in martial arts. It is too far for a punch to land cleanly and close enough that a committed fighter can cover it in 1 step. It is a teaching distance. The man who chooses that distance at the beginning of an encounter is the man who understands what is about to happen. The man who does not choose it, who does not understand why it was chosen, has already been placed at a disadvantage he cannot yet see. Gerald Wiley set both of his hands flat on the folding table. He did not move them again. A fight is not 2 men standing near each other. A fight is a conversation about space, conducted at a speed that does not allow for revision. The man who controls the space controls the conversation. The man who controls the conversation decides when it ends. Second one. Tyson moved. He did not telegraph and he did not hesitate, and the jab he threw was the same jab that had been stopping experienced men from breathing freely for 2 years. In this gymnasium, it was thrown from the correct distance and with the correct rotation of the shoulder, and there was nothing wrong with it technically. It did not arrive. The man in the work boots moved his head 3 inches to the left, and the jab went past his right ear. He did not step back, he did not raise his hands, he moved only his head, and only as far as required, and then stopped. Tyson reset. Frank Calhoun's pen touched the notepad and stayed there without writing. Second 2. The cross came after the jab the way crosses are designed to come. Low and fast and bent toward the inside of the defense. Tyson threw it with his full right side behind it, and it was a serious punch thrown with serious intention by someone who understood the mechanics of serious punching. The man in the work boots was no longer standing where it was aimed. He had not stepped back. He had not stepped left. He had taken one step at an angle, forward and to the outside of Tyson's right shoulder, and the cross went into air. And the man in the work boots was now standing 12 inches to Tyson's right and slightly behind him. The room understood before Tyson did. Teddy Atlas, standing at the edge of the floor, folded his arms across his chest and looked at the floor and then looked up again. Second 3. Tyson turned. He was 15 years old, and he was faster than most people in that room, and he turned with genuine speed. He threw the left hook as he turned because that is what the left hook is designed for: the close range, the pivot, the inside of a rotation. The man in the white t-shirt rolled inside it, took it across the top of his left shoulder where it carried almost nothing, and his own right hand came up in the same motion and stopped in the air 1 inch from the left side of Tyson's jaw. His knuckles were touching air. He held it there. It was not a fast motion. The holding of it was the point. He held it there for 2 full seconds, which in the middle of an exchange is an enormous amount of time, and everyone in the gymnasium understood what the 2 seconds meant. Gerald Wiley exhaled through his nose. Chuck Norris lowered his hand. He took 1 step back. He was breathing at the same rate he had been breathing when he set down his paper cup. Tyson was looking at him. The 411 people in the room were looking at both of them. Tyson did not move for a moment. The room did not move. Outside, on the 2-lane road, another vehicle moved through the dark. Its lights crossed the high windows above the bleachers and kept moving. The world had not adjusted to what had just happened inside the gymnasium. It was continuing at its own pace, indifferent and unchanged. Then Mike Tyson did something that the people who were present would describe, in the years that followed, in different ways and with different details, the way oral history always works: accumulating texture, losing precision, keeping the shape of the thing. He stepped forward. He extended his right hand. Chuck Norris took it. The private sentence was spoken at this moment. The men were close enough that no one else in the room heard it. What Norris said was not confirmed publicly for many years. What has been reported by 2 witnesses who were standing within proximity is that it was short, that it was not unkind, and that Tyson listened to it without moving. The fork in the road stood in front of Mike Tyson at that moment, as it stands in front of every young person who has been publicly corrected in the presence of their peers. On one side, the excuse, the technical explanation, the claim that the conditions were wrong or the surface unfamiliar or the preparation incomplete. On the other side, something harder and more durable. Tyson did not take the first road. He looked at Chuck Norris and he nodded once, a single movement of the head that did not require translation. Teddy Atlas would say later, in private, that what he saw that night changed something in how he thought about what the boy he was training was capable of becoming. Not because of the loss, because of what came after it. Chuck Norris retrieved his canvas jacket from the bench. He folded it over one arm. A man in the second row, a former tournament competitor from New Haven who had trained under one of Norris's own students, reached out and touched his shoulder briefly as he passed, just briefly, as though confirming something. He walked to the door. He did not stop. He did not look back. He did not tell the story afterward to anyone who has been confirmed. The story was told by the people who stayed. In the weeks that followed, it moved from the Catskill Gymnasium through the networks of people who carry stories about fighters the way rivers carry objects, accumulating detail, losing weight, arriving changed. By the time it had traveled from Catskill to New York City to the training rooms of the West Coast, it had acquired attributes it did not have at the origin. The distance grew in some tellings. The seconds multiplied, the crowd swelled. But the center of the thing stayed intact. because it had been witnessed by too many people with too much experience for it to be reduced entirely to legend. Gerald Wiley was still alive. Frank Calhoun had his notepad. 3 men in the first row had eyes that had been watching men fight for decades, and knew what they had seen. What they had seen was this. A man who had nothing to prove walked into a room and proved nothing. And proved everything. There is a difference between the story a man tells about what he is capable of and what becomes visible when the conditions are correct. Most men spend their lives ensuring the conditions are never correct. The man in the gray canvas jacket walked into them without breaking his pace. A few years later, in a different city, a journalist asked Chuck Norris to describe the Catskill Gymnasium. He did not confirm or deny the details. He said 2 things. The first was this. There is nothing to teach a man who is not yet ready to be taught. The second was this. A room full of people who know what they are watching is a more honest audience than most men encounter in a lifetime. Then he stopped talking about it. The best fighters in the world share one characteristic that has nothing to do with speed or strength or technique. They know precisely what they are able to do, and they do not spend one additional moment thinking about it. The precision of their self-knowledge is the weapon. Everything else is the delivery. Next week we will be telling the story of the afternoon in 1979 when Chuck Norris walked into a Hollywood production office, and a former Special Forces officer decided to make him prove something in front of 12 people who had no idea what was about to happen. The office did not have a floor mat. It did not matter.